Today is Thursday, May 16th. We are noticed from 12:10 to 1:10 p.m. We'll start with introductions and then we'll move through our business.
Cameron Perez Verdillo.
Mark Littlefield.
Zach Johnson.
Anna Brawley.
Meg Zalatal.
And on the phone, we have Mr. Constant.
Here.
And any other members on the phone? Okay. And then also in the room, we are joined by members of the administration, a member, I think, the chair of our CFO, of our trust fund board, and then members of the public and administration in the back. So first, we will move on to our, one second. Yeah, that would be good. Thank you to my co-chair. So for those looking at our agenda, we have slightly reorganized the agenda. So we've got unfinished business, and I'll just note some of those items are things that we are not going to be doing active updates on. One example is the ARPA grant distribution. We've gotten an update, and we don't anticipate new information on that for a while. So we have tried to organize these in order, but I guess I will ask consent to move the agenda around slightly just to, because I see we have our Budget Advisory Commission chair here. So I would suggest we let him give his update first, and then we'll move through the agenda. If there's any objection, not see any. Okay. Nolan, if you'd like to come up and give a brief report, please do so.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, I'm Nolan Clauda, and I'm the outgoing chair now of the Municipal Budget Advisory Commission. So our meeting was held last Thursday, and the chief item of business that we had, our major item of business in addition to our usual reports, was to discuss a resolution that had been drafted with regard to the short-term rental question and the potential use of of bed tax from short-term rentals being used for some kind of a mitigation fund. And so we have passed a resolution. I think it has formally passed, and it probably hasn't yet been delivered to the Assembly, but it essentially calls for a couple of pieces being resolved. One is that the Budget Advisory Commission urges the Assembly to pass an ordinance or a resolution that mandates that short-term rental platforms and providers disclose essential data. So that would be the first start of it, figuring out, how many short-term rentals there are and by what zip code and so forth, to revise municipal code and the dedicated distributions to room tax revenues to reflect current fiscal reality. So kind of a general statement there, but how those funds are distributed, and looking at contracts nearing expiration, with regard to where those funds go, some of the organizations that benefit from them, looking at the promotion of the tourism industry and what that should mean in terms of definition to include capital investments, marketing efforts, enhancements to public facilities, and other factors that might be more inclusive of what it means to promote tourism. And looking at also ways of mitigating some of the effects of short-term rentals, I think on the Anchorage housing market in the longer term with some of those revenues. So that was our biggest item of business for the meeting. Also, we did hold elections for chair and vice chair. So I'm standing down. I think I said last time that it would be my last report to this group, but it's actually this time. So the group unanimously elected Matthew Harvey to serve as chair. Matthew has been with the Budget Advisory Commission for about a year or so, and he is a staffer in the legislature for Senator James Kaufman. But Matthew's been an excellent voice and a leader, and he's actually our principal drafter of resolutions, among other things. So he's taken a great leadership role, and I think that he'll make an excellent chair. And we reelected Al Tamani as vice chair. And so I think everybody knows Al. He's a veteran of the Budget Advisory Commission, so he'll continue in that vice chair role as well. So otherwise, we did hear the concerns from the OMB director about some of the financial reporting issues and things that need to be cleaned up. So that was something that we were all interested in, and not necessarily fully understanding the issues involved there, but it was discussed at our meeting to some degree. Otherwise, those are my major updates. And if there's any questions for the group, I'd be happy to take those. Or if not, I'm happy to yield my time to the next person.
Yeah, thanks. It looks like we have members Alatel in the queue.
Thanks. No question, but I don't know if you'll be able to stick around, but we're going to take up that. We talked about the Budget Advisory Commission. We're going to start having that conversation around MLMP and what remains to be done. And I believe we have a handout, so hopefully we can help get that information back to BAC as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I'll just note we were also joined on the phone by Member Martinez. Any other questions from folks? Okay, I don't see any, but I will just say thank you so much for your service as chair, Mr. Clauda. And I know you've been a member of the BAC for multiple terms now, so thank you so much for your hard work on this. And then I'll also say we have not received the resolution yet, but we'll look for that when appropriate. And I appreciate the conversation around taxes and our general tax structure. So just to say that would be an item to bring back to the members as well, that I anticipate there will be several conversations about bed tax, about other tax structure. We certainly have seen a lot of conversation about property tax, who pays, looking at incentives, things like that. So that would be a really great place for the BAC to continue to be active and thoughtful about kind of our revenue conversation. And actually, I know a few years ago, there was work by the BAC, I think, but under prior membership around kind of that mix of revenue. So might be worth dusting that off as well and reviewing. So thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Okay. And with that, why don't we move to our next item? So under unfinished business, we have a new item that we are going to keep on the agenda month over month, and that is MLNP Municipal Light and Power Sale wrap up. So for those who do not remember, we used to have a utility, our electric utility called Municipal Light and Power. It was in, I think, 2020 that the deal finalized, something like that, a few years ago, that it was sold to Chugach Electric. And so because there was a sale of a utility, that's a big deal. And there's a lot of kind of closeout pieces. And of course, we've had, as the municipality, have had many other things going on. So we're coming back to that. And I know we had some of those items were brought up during the first quarter budget revision process as well. And the conversation with us, the Budget and Finance co-chairs, has been that we do need to take that up, and let's take the time to do that. So with that, I will hand it over to, I believe, Mr. Thurn, and then just note that we have a short handout of what those items are.
Then does everybody have that handout? Because I'm not seeing it myself as well. I see it says handout there.
Yeah, maybe we could check.
Madam Co-Chair, it wasn't finalized. If you want to check your email, I just brought it back to the top of your inbox and we can get it printed and distributed.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, we'll take a look at that. And essentially what we wanted to do today is just have a brief conversation about the tasks ahead and not get into depth. So maybe while that's being distributed, we can have Mr. Thurn speak to it.
Just leave it as draft. Just do it as it is and we can talk through it and we'll find consensus. Thank you.
Yeah, this is kind of
Thank
the
you.
early stages of this particular thing. I mean, I've talked to co-chairs about this. We've been working on MLP since November. It was one of my priorities when I asked Sharon to come back as OMB director to really focus on. We've had to bring back some lawyers and a variety of different things. So I just basically asked that we start putting these topics on the agenda, more to be able to talk about them. This is a great opportunity to do that in advance of any ARs or AMs that have to come forward for decision-making purposes. So basically right now, I think we just have a very high level listing of the different topics that we're going to have to be able to go through. And Golden Lion, for example, that there's been a lot of discussions about that. There's been a lot of discussions about PERS, unfunded PERS liability, both maybe the last few years, this year, and in future years, and some of the endeavors that the Assembly might be seeing, and maybe some legislative fixes that might be something to fight for going forward to help mitigate that. I'll try to hit Golden Lion again just as a topic. That is October of 25. We have to have spent that $15 million. So there'll be a lot of discussions about that. And currently Golden Lion is accounting for about 10 million of that, but is not in a current use that qualifies in accordance with the RCA order. So we need to kind of move towards that. So there's just a variety of different topics, financially, monetarily. There are items that we have buckets of money left, just a kind of a high level thing. They didn't know all the liabilities that might be coming up after the sale, so they left money in certain buckets. A large amount went to the corpus of the MOA trust, but these other buckets were left to fix those or pay those things and do those kind of charges into the future. Well, we've never really took the time to go back in, and we needed some period of time to go by to let any of those things come in, but we also needed to go back in and look at them and identify them and revisit them. We are getting a lot of pressure from our auditor, BDO, that it's becoming more and more difficult for the municipality to justify having MLP or any accounts in MLP related in our MOA financials for an asset we no longer own several years after the fact. So they are very interested in us resolving all of those, which ultimately would lead to moving the monies in those balances someplace else, whether that be paying bills, whether that be putting it into the trust. I mean, there's a variety of things, but we cannot keep this money in these buckets for an entity that we no longer have. So that's why we really have a strong desire to start moving these forward. Historically, you probably be like, wow, 2023 financials is where we have to get this in. Well, as you were well aware, we don't even have 22 done. So right now, normally we'd be talking right now about, hey, we got to get this done because we're getting ready to close 23 financials and we need to make these decisions. But the reality is we haven't even started 23 financials. So the bad news is we haven't started, but the good news is we do have many months to be able to start working through all these individual issues and putting them out for discussion with not only the assembly, but also the public, and ultimately the assembly voting and moving forward with these things. But it is really critical that all of these decisions are probably made, by the end of the summer, September, October time period. For a couple of different reasons. I mean, if there's going to be money that needs to be put towards Golden Lion, that probably means capital and construction time, and you're running up to a year to get that done here by the end of the summer. So that's one thing. Moving doing journal entries to be able to move the money wherever decisions happen to be. That needs to be done this summer so we can reflect them in the 23 financials. So it is a really important topic. I've been pushing it for quite some time. A lot of work has been done on it. Unfortunately, I've asked the OMB department to switch over to the 22 ACFR, and they're going full bore on that, and I probably would have talked about it a little bit more today. But rest assured that over the next few months here, we'll have more discussions on these individual topics, and then start getting some direction and then ultimately putting whatever memos we need forward. But just kind of understand the ultimate goal here is that we got to get all these decisions done and get the accounts balanced and brought to zero so that we can reflect them ultimately in our 23 financials. So that's kind of the goal. And I appreciate the co-chairs in understanding the complexity and the as you've just seen in first quarter budget revisions, some of these topics are pretty comprehensive and require some additional thought and certainly question and answer and discussions. And this is an avenue that they've agreed that this is of pretty significant importance and detail, and this is kind of the start of that process.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Thurn. I will briefly state, we do have our handout now, and for folks who are watching, I'm going to just briefly restate kind of the 5 general areas, and then I'll turn it to the queue, starting with Member Zalatel. The closeout task that we identified a couple weeks ago and that you guys have been working on for months is dealing with the Alaska Center for Treatment, and then requirement to spend $15 million on capital, fixing a prior year expenditure with the Golden Lion that was operating expenditures that was charged to the wrong place, the PERS and pension liability that you mentioned, the workers' comp issue as far as remaining liability there, and then basically accounting and other closeout paperwork, which includes, it sounds like, addressing those kind of that pots of money that are sitting out there. So then I will turn to the queue. Member Zalatel.
Great, thank you. So two things I hope we can get out of today is we have these listed as 1 through 5. If there's feedback from the administration on really ordering these in the way that they need to be ordered, so we can kind of take them up one at a time, or if there are some with equal press that we take them up, concurrently. The other is, Mr. Thurn, you described, there's this money and these buckets from the ML&P closeout. I think it'd be really helpful for us to get the overall fiscal picture. So how much money is in which buckets? And then overall picture of the outstanding liabilities we have and which buckets are they eligible for. So we can kind of get a balance sheet going of what we have available versus what we have for liabilities. And then we can figure out kind of how to get to hopefully 0 or whatever the plan needs to be. And I think that would be really helpful. And I know that the fixed Golden Lion prior year operating expenditure was one that was brought up in first quarter, and it has a dollar amount with it. And so I think that one will be one that I don't know that it's terribly pressing. That's my opinion about it. But it could be something that as long as we know the amount and we have to fix it by a particular deadline, like the final closeout, we can take that up in due course to try to find wherever we need to transfer those
It also
funds.
might be an easier fix compared to some of these other
Yeah.
policy-driven type things.
Um,
It was actually my goal to talk about that one first, and we've kind of got sidetracked here, but I would like to, seems to me that we should be able to get through that one relatively easy. Long-term PERS liability, and changes with the state legislature, that's the policy thing. I mean, there's no dollar impacting of that, but it's a topic that needs to be aware of. Going back and taking the PERS that's been in the health and the human resources budget over the last couple of years, that one might be a little, it's kind of in between the two to be able to do that. I am obviously very interested in moving the 15 million Golden Lion just because I know the volume of work, RFPs, that's just a bear to be able to do, and I think that's something we continue to talk about on an ongoing basis. But that's probably something we need to at least have a path identified and start moving down, because it's going to take the entire amount of time between now and October of 25 to probably work to get that resolved.
Yeah, go ahead, Member Zalton.
So for the Alaska Center for Treatment, I think that's more than just a budget and fiscal conversation. It's a vision and, the set of steps we would want to accomplish in order to make an Alaska Center for Treatment happen. So I think what we can do is likely ask the chair if we can do a work session about that and really take it out of the budget and finance for a moment, and invite the health department. The health department prepared the prior RFP. We can take a look at that, why it didn't get any bids, and really kind of dig in on where that vision is and what does that timeline look like, and maybe get a timeline from the purchasing department. Should it go out for RFP, we get a response, and then we have to make everything come back through. And then we can always bring it back into this committee if that's the appropriate place. But it feels like there's some other moving parts other than just closing out the 15 million. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And then I'll see if there's questions from members generally, and then it sounds like there was, you'd like to dig into that second item on the list a little bit more, so the Golden Lion. So Member Branca?
I was just wondering, when we have a ordinance come forward where we're going to fund like the awning of the Golden Lion, where there was leaks and stuff, is that coming out of that 15 million, or it's coming out of the general budget and then we are somehow needing to reimburse ourselves for?
Through the chair, Ms. Branga, that's a multi-part answer to your question. I believe anything that goes to do work on the building for Golden Lion should come out of that 15 million. If as I believed was originally and is most likely to be the future direction, that's the building that we want for the treatment center. So anything capital related needs to come out of that 15 million. I believe and that's one of the topics that we have here. Some operating funds were charged to that account, which were believed it should not have been. So that's where we'd probably want to take some out of that. And I also believe that there was also some money that was spent out of the M&O capital budget for that building, but came out of theirs, which probably should have been charged to the 15 million to begin with. So we actually have 3 different types of things going there. But I would hope that in the end, at least from my perspective, if it's capital related towards that building, and that is our building for the treatment center, then we should do our best collaboratively to charge every dollar of capital expense to that 15 million, because we get no benefit. We will have to prove that we spent the 15 million. And if we spent 2 million over here and 13 million over here, they're only going to say you've only spent 13 million. We might as well get it all in that one spot. But we've done a little bit of everything over the last few years, and that's one part of this discussion and cleanup, and let's make it happen to put everything back in the buckets to be able to do that. But I think that's the direction we would like to go. But it's not as simple of answer, unfortunately, because we have done a little bit of hodgepodge on everything.
Okay, other questions?
And I'm gonna make one small comment here with regards to this particular thing. I asked Alex to do it, but maybe he can lead in here. I just want everybody to be aware that there is language in there about in the settlement agreement about what was supposed to happen with leftover buckets of money, and sometimes that language might have said you're to put it into the trust. So as we work through these particular issues, there might be some things where people are going to want to know, well, what was originally intended or what was really discussed? And is that an obligation, or is that something that might be reconsidered at this particular point? But I do think that there is a trust component that we should also be aware of, and what the language was in the part of the sale as we're working through these particular topics of discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Thurn. And yeah, I think that really speaks to what Member Zalatel asked for, that we can continue to work on, is kind of the list of what money we have, what obligations we have, to what extent we can match those up, and then the other pieces that we need to also figure out. And to the point about kind of legislative action, that's certainly something we can come back to and really work to advocate next year in session. And we can make sure that if there is a change that needs to be made for some reason, that wherever that needs to be, we can include that in the legislative program.
And just for the group here, as you can remember, I think OMB Director mentioned it's approximately 1.3 million a year is our MLP unfunded liability obligation, and currently that obligation is in perpetuity. It never ends. All the employees could be passed away, all their dependents could be passed away. It does not matter, and that could turn out to be lots and lots of money to the municipality long term. So that's why it's a topic of not only the municipality, but also some other cities have experience with this unfunded PERS liability type things and commitments. But you all know that this is 1.2 to 1.4 million a year, and that's not going away. And that's why that's a fairly significant topic, but not an easy one to get fixed. But we're going to do our best to try to at least make everybody aware of all of the issues and concerns, and that way, if something were to happen over the next few weeks, you're all not forgetting what things need to be done here in the near future.
Okay, one last call for questions, and then I know Member Zalatel, so go ahead.
Thanks. So if we want to take up the fixed Golden Lion prior year operating expenditures, I would ask if the administration could bring forward kind of whatever the menu of options might be, particularly taking a look at what the kind of truing up of the various Golden Lion expenditures between M&O, maintenance and operations, and then what we should have been spending out of the capital. And then we could maybe review that either at the next committee. It would likely be an ordinance. So it could either already be submitted or not, but then that way we can actually get that one off the list.
We will do our best to work towards that goal. I think that's a good goal.
Any other questions from members? Folks on the phone, speak up if you have a question. Okay. Well, I think that we covered that one for now. We know there's more work to come, but let's go ahead and move on to our next agenda item. So thank you again. So under new business, we did our Budget Advisory Commission already. So let's hear next from the MOA Trust Fund Board.
Through the chair, Alex Slivka. So I'm currently serving as the chair of the MOA Trust. And so just wanted to bring you up to date that the trust board continues to meet. We had our most recent meeting yesterday, and we continue to execute on the fiduciary duties that are the obligation of the board, specifically looking at returns of the trust, which have been in line with the benchmark. We have established a dividend payment policy since we're obligated to pay 16 point something this year. We have actually, in the course of those discussions, raised the first half of that dividend. We've settled on a policy that would be most effective both for the municipality as well as the trust of making the payments in June and December. And so you should expect to see that happen. And then we have reviewed all the existing managers. So in terms of the investments, they are going as we would have expected them. I will add in relation to the comments that Alden made that the trust does receive roughly $2.5 million in payments from MOA Hydro as a component of the sale of ML&P. And it has, he said, as Alden said, when we were conducting the sale, I think the charge was that proceeds were to be used to pay off all debts, and then any residual would be deposited in the trust. And so this was a debt that, despite numerous conversations, the PERS liability debt, and it's the past service liability. And I think anybody who's been in Alaska for the last 10 or 20 years understands the nature of that. It's spread everywhere. It's such a big number that the state is actually paying a fair portion of it, and this only as a component is actually being paid by the various participating entities. At the time, the thought was it would last 20 odd years at roughly $1 million a year. And there's many things that go into that calculation, where our interest rates were, mortality, et cetera. It would seem to me that, and now speaking for myself, not for the trust, that, taking these $2.5 million in proceeds that we're getting and using those to pay that PERS liability makes absolute and complete sense, because it's an ongoing debt of the sale. But I know that you have very good lawyers working on this, and I'm sure they'll come to a reasonable conclusion. But the trust is aware that could happen, and it's not going to have an impact one way or the other on the overall return of the trust. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Member Salatel.
Thank you. You anticipated my question a little bit, which was, could we, make that diversion? Could the trust board take that up and basically write us a letter or a resolution, seeing if there's consensus there that it wouldn't have a material effect on the trust, so that we can, have that kind of information formally as we look for a solution?
Through the chair, yes, we can do that.
Okay, other questions or comments from members? Okay, not seeing any, but I will echo that request because I think we can take all the advice we can get. So, so we will look for that at a future meeting. Okay, if there's no other comments on the trust fund board, then we can move on to the last couple items on our our agenda are our usual kind of budget updates. So I'll point folks in the public and members to the handouts that we got an email. I don't know if we have a physical I don't think we do have a physical copy, but essentially those are the reports that were provided on a monthly basis. And then I will then turn to I guess I'll see if Mr. Thurn has any comments on the budget to actuals, because I know our OMB director could not be here today, but otherwise we can also just skip right down to the revenue report. So Mr. Thurn, if you have any comments on the first item.
Yeah, I think that's exactly where we'd like to go. I think we should continue to prepare these on a monthly basis so that you have them. As I stated earlier, the OMB department has been reassigned to help with the 22 audit. So we're trying to focus on that, and the analysis of these reports was just not a priority given where we are in that other situation right now. So I'm hoping that we'll be in a slightly better position next month where we can not only produce the reports, but also be able to give a highlight at that point in time. But rest assured, the OMB department is working many hours to move forward on the ACFR. So anyway, I'm hoping that we'll get back more on track from a communication standpoint next month. That would be my hope.
Sounds good. Okay, then let's move directly to the revenue update. And we have our treasurer, Glenn Cipriano. So go ahead and give your update.
There we go. Thank you, Madam Chair. We have provided our revenue summary highlights report. This will be a very brief report. Usually we start these reports up in June and July as we have enough data to actually give some meaningful totals and get an idea of where some of these projections are going to be for the year. So the report is in your hand. You'll notice that the highlights are as of data we have received in SAP through April 10th. So if you'll join me in the report, let's begin on page 3, where we see some rental vehicle tax revenue. The percent you're looking for today is probably about 25%. As the first quarter is done, which is the 25%, and then we're just really 10 days into April's total. So we're showing rental vehicle tax at about 20% of what we've budgeted for the year, which looks to be right about on schedule. If we're more than 25%, we're ahead of where Treasury anticipates the annual revenue will be. And if we're under 25%, we're lagging. So on page 4, you'll see that beginning with tobacco tax, we look to be a little bit ahead of schedule at 35% or 6.7 million received. Motor vehicle tax is right on schedule for what we budgeted for the year. So is auto registration. And we're seeing a little more revenue in marijuana retail tax than we anticipated so far. But that's a very seasonal item, and I believe we should probably wait to see what the latter summer and autumn results look like. APD counter fines are right about on schedule as well. We're seeing on the last page, building safety fund ahead of schedule, almost 50% of what we've budgeted so far. And alcohol retail tax is running a little bit more than we had anticipated at this time of year. Again, these are very preliminary totals. We're looking for the controllers group to verify these totals. They're the last check before they go into SAP. So there could be some lag in some of the figures that you're looking at. Again, very preliminary, and be happy to take any questions at this time.
Yeah, thank you very much. I have I'll do my question last. So Member Johnson.
Yeah, thank you. So with the building safety fund, noticing that's up at 50%, I mean, I would imagine there's probably some seasonality to that.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, very much so.
So is this just sort of where we would expect to be, or is there anything we can kind of infer from this that might speak to broader trends?
I would say at this point in time, it would be probably not a profitable exercise to infer that this kind of level will be there. Let's wait to see what summer looks like. Again, the previous holder of the Treasury position was hesitant to really kind of point out where things are going until we get into the September timeframe.
That's fair, and I saw Mr. Thurn made a gesture.
Yeah, and this one here is near and dear to my heart and so forth. Please remember, we would expect this relatively soon to be going up because you approved that 0.045 mill levy, because this is the account that's running approximately a $15 million negative fund balance, which is significantly impacting our finances. And as you approved in your first quarter budget revisions, a factor. I think it's going to be like $1.1 million or $1.2 million, somewhere in that end number, to be able to do that. So as that mill comes in, I'm expecting that revenue goes to that specific account because of what you guys approved in this last time. The intent there is we want that number to be positive, more, and especially more positive than what the expenditures are. So this year, and I'm going to ask Glenn as well, as we move forward here, it's not just how that fund has been doing based upon the last 20 years historically. We have a mill rate adjustment that's specifically targeting that one that we're going to be seeing the impacts of as we go forward here from the paying of the property taxes. I would assume, given that we have a June and an August payment cycle, that's when that revenue is going to come in for that particular one, and then he's going to this particular account's going to reflect those revenues, and it's going to go up. So doubt he budgeted for that at the beginning of the year, not knowing that the assembly was going to approve that here just last week. So I would like that for people to remember that and put it as a part of your conversation going forward. But ultimately, remember, we've got this huge boat anchor that we're towing around. We have many boat anchors, but that's one of them that you're towing around, and we need to see some significant revenue increases in that particular area to try to help offset that. And you just recently approved one. So as he gets into June and August, maybe it'll be a month lag on each one of those, but I would expect that account from a revenue perspective to be impacted by that. So just kind of put that in your brains as you start looking at that one. Make sure you're looking for it, know the impact, know the dilemma we're in on that particular one, and that the assembly is attempting to start to address that. And maybe we haven't addressed the big thing, but maybe we're trying to at least stop it from growing this year, and we need to reflect it in that one. So I just wanted to provide that extra context so that you tie together what you just did with that particular one, and as we go forward, and not think that, oh, we're doing really good in building this year. Yeah, well, you added $1.1 million in extra revenue through property taxes to help that fund out. So just kind of put that in the back of it, and maybe even put a note in there going forward so that people don't forget that, please.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate that. And then that also kind of leads into, I guess, my big picture question. So alcohol tax obviously is a dedicated fund. So the revenue goes in a separate fund. Marijuana tax is now that same way. Building safety service fund is basically, as Alden said, filling in the deficit that we have, right? But I guess my general, and I understand also it's early in the year, so we're not looking too hard at these numbers as final numbers or a trend in themselves. But my general question is more for, I guess, budgeting overall, and these ones that again are not in dedicated funds or not put to a specific purpose. I guess, how do you all approach that? Like, at what point, for example, would one of these numbers be so far out of whack, like maybe under budget, where we would have to actually go back and revise the budget itself? Because as I've watched over the years, basically some revenue comes in better than expected, some is lower than expected, and often it kind of works out, it washes out. But I just wonder if you could talk through that a little bit, kind of how these interact with our general budget.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. What we usually look at very closely is the seasonality of the revenue flow. So normally in the late summer, we're getting a really good picture of what year end would start to look like. Some of them are notoriously difficult to predict, like hotel revenue and rental vehicle. But as the year develops, I think last year we were at probably about 99.5% of what we had budgeted. So the accuracy that we've seen in the last few years, maybe the last 3 to 5 years, has been less than 1% deviance from what we've predicted at the end of the first quarter when we do our first quarter budget revisions. But we will be looking at these probably in a little more serious estimation of how we're doing with trends as we get into like September, October. And again, we can't change the numbers, but we can get a good feel for where we're going to finish up. But I would say September, October, and then this is assuming that controllers has kept pace with the revenue and that our SAP entries are up to date.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's just helpful context for members, right? Especially if we start seeing one number doing really well and it's not one of those dedicated funds, then we can't say, oh, look, there's extra money, right? Because we have to really see. And I appreciate you mentioning the seasonality and really taking a look more toward the end of the year, kind of where we ended up. Other questions? Okay. And again, folks on the phone, I don't see any text, so please just speak up if you do have questions.
And I have a couple other points that I'd like to make, not necessarily attached to revenue if there's an opportunity.
Okay. Well, I don't see any other comments or questions on the revenue. So yeah, we're technically in other business, so we'll do any kind of wrap up that we need to do. So go ahead, Mr. Thorne.
Perfect. I kind of look at this as all finance related things. So I wanted Glenn to give an update on property tax notices and how successful, if we were successful in going out to 3 digits. And I know you all get phone calls from a lot of people if you're not happy with their taxes. So I wanted Glenn to give you an update on where he is on getting those out, and then I'll make a couple other comments as well after that.
Okay. Yeah, perfect. Go ahead.
Okay, happy to do that. We received our electronic file that has all the mill rates for the year from OMB. And what we do after that is we'll put it into a test environment to see what the totals come back looking like. And so we've done that. We shut out any changes or any changes to the database that the assessors do. And we shut that down for about 2 or 3 days. And we're just finishing that up now. But so far in test, totals are good. We're under the budget cap. And we are seeing that 3-digit calculation come out true, which was a concern of ours. Now, after that, we'll send our file after we proof it to our printing vendor. And then we'll actually get a look at what those tax bills are going to look like. Now, we do believe we're going to see those 3 digits on the tax bill itself. And that's important because if people check the calculations, if it rounds to 4.5, the numbers are going to be different than what they anticipate because they don't see the 4.5 on there. But we think we're going to see all 3 digits. So far, so good. We'll probably finish that exercise this week. We hope to have the file in the hands of the print vendor. Latest would be 20th, 21st. And so we've got a couple of days beyond that if there's problems, but so far, so good.
Thank you. And just, can you clarify briefly, you mentioned the 3 digits. Do you mean out to the thousands digit, or can you just unpack what that means a little bit?
Yeah, so you did 4.5 basis points on that fund. So we want to see that 0.045 because if people are checking, we'll get phone calls if
it's 05,
yeah,
we're going to have a problem. Well,
right.
It'll be accurate, but there'll be so many questions that's going to light up everybody's things. So we are desperately trying to ensure that the visual presentation is 045 on that statement so that people will calculate it, because that's going to be a storm. So they were going to make significant changes to the tax bill format this year over last year. And we actually put that, we postponed it a year because this digit thing was a bigger deal at this point in time. So we're going with the old format with the 3-digit in there, and that's what they're targeting. So we can meet our down. We are going to try to do one thing on time and perfect. And I told him this is my one hope that we have to do that. So that we're currently marching towards that one item for the year, and it's on his shoulders to make sure that happens. But I do think this is important. This is a big deal to people when they see them. And as you remember, the house percentages or the valuations went up 9%. So there's going to be a lot of people looking at mill rates and valuations and stuff. And the last thing I need him to do is be doing math inaccurately, because we'll never get out of that thing. So.
And our last concern is that we have a pretty small staff of people who would be able to respond to phone calls, and like 0.5% or 1% response just overwhelmed. We would be in the hundreds of inquiries, and that would simply overwhelm the staff available to service them.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Beresford. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, just curious. I'm not remembering where it is, but I know there's some wonderful resources that I think was created by the municipality in terms of for frequently asked questions, how we calculate these things, that sort of thing. Is that something that can be, do we have any resources that we can give to people so when they do receive those, there's a place for them to go to get more information automatically? Are you following what I'm talking about? The
Right.
There was a frequently asked page, but then there was also some really wonderful things that were done, I think, a year or 2 years ago on how we come up with these things.
Yeah, through the chair, the assessors group does maintain their frequently asked questions page, and it does take them through how you calculate your tax bill. Treasury does not have anything specifically, but the assessors group does.
Is that included? Is there any information that actually goes out? There's nothing on the actual card itself.
Correct. There is, yes,
There's
there's
not.
nothing on there.
Okay.
Right.
I'm just curious about that. I wonder if there's anything the city's doing in terms of just getting some information out to the public at the same period of time. Just curious. So
I just want the dump coupon in there. That's all I keep harassing him about.
Yeah, thank you. That's a good point. I know the assessor does the valuation report, but that's way back in January, and I don't know that it goes into all those mechanics. But that does dovetail with, I guess, my request generally is when you guys are sending that out, whoever's appropriate to send, keep the assembly staff in the loop as well.
That's exactly what I was thinking, Anna,
Yeah.
is that we, maybe what you and Jack can do is find that link, email it to the clerk, and then have the clerk email it to the entire assembly. And as they get questions, in which inevitably they will, they can just say, oh, here's the link that goes to it. And then they don't have to go looking forward and that kind of
yeah,
stuff.
it was. I can't count how many of those last year I sent out just because people would call and email and would voice concerns, and to be able to have that access and to have the timing right as well is to make sure that we have all that stuff updated and is current. So thanks.
Yeah, thank you. And I think along with that too, if you all keep in communication as far as when those are going out, because I think it would also be valuable for our staff and assembly leadership to send, a press release, for example. We can include information in our newsletter, just getting that out as much as possible so folks know when it's coming, when they can see their mailbox or, it hits the mailbox, and then where to go for questions. Because I agree, I think we can all work together to head off kind of any concerns that folks have if possible. Okay, I don't see any other questions or comments on this topic, so we'll just see if you have any other wrap up.
Perfect. So I wanted to kind of go back up to earthquake just since Carrie is here. And we are going to continue just to provide the data for your midnight readings should you want as we go through here. But I do want to continue to I try to highlight these points so you don't forget. This is a situation where everybody talks about our fund balance and those kind of things. And I want you to just to always remember that while we got almost all of our COVID money back, we have not gotten all of our money back on earthquake because of the way it goes. So when you start seeing this report, it's a good representation of the projects that are still outstanding. And by my calculation in my head, we've spent approximately $9 million more than what we've actually been reimbursed yet. Not that we don't expect ultimately to be reimbursed, but that's a fairly, just like the BSSA was 15 million negative, we're running about a $9 million negative on earthquake. Most of those projects are having to run back through FEMA to be re-obligated to a higher amount or a different scope of work. And that takes forever. And if you ever have any questions, Mr. Littlefield did it for every one of his road projects. So he'd tell you exactly how long it takes, but we have some significant dollar impacts on earthquake, and Carrie and the EOC are aware of this. We want that money back as quickly as we can, and they need to be working actively on it. But I do want you, when you see this, that that earthquake money that we've spent already that we haven't gotten back is another component of us not meeting our 10 and 2 for our things. So when you start taking 15 million for BSSA, 9 million for this, we're $1.1 million short on COVID. Those are all things that ultimately, when the finance department says we don't have any money to spend on anything else, I'm just kind of always try to direct you to certain areas where you can remember that there's some rationale and reasoning. And I just wanted to take the opportunity to re-highlight again earthquake, which is an area where almost all of those projects are completed from a work perspective and expense perspective, but it's taking a significant amount of additional time, which reduces our decision-making and flexibility of being able to get. Now, when that money comes back, it'll help prop up the fund balance, but it takes a long time. And unlike COVID, which we've gotten all back pretty much, we're 25, 30% still on this one, and it is having an impact. So I just wanted to take this opportunity once again to educate people, remind them of these types of things as you hear us say certain things as we go through the year and what our financials are and fund balance and those kind of things. So I just try to take that opportunity. So thank you. That's all I had.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Thurn. And then also I'll point members in the public, we did actually get 2 handouts. These are really great. Thank you so much. About the 2018 earthquake. This was one of the items that we were not going to spend a lot of time on in our meetings month over month until we have updates, but I appreciate the big picture from Mr. Thurn and really keeping in mind all of the complex pieces of our finances. So with that, I'll just see if anybody else has any comments. Member Pronga?
I'm glad you circled back to earthquake. So I was out of the room when you went through this FEMA reimbursements, and I'm just curious on Goose Lake alternate project. And that's one, it says obligated amount and then expected final cost. I've never seen what they were hoping to do there. Is it tear down because the building is, just curious on that one.
I'll just be real quick before I can tell you, the only buildings that were demolished are the Chugiak Fire Station number 11 in Eagle River and the ARL building at the dump, solid waste services. Those are the only buildings that were demolished and redone. So anything else on here was a fixing of an existing facility. But Carrie can go into more detail maybe on that particular.
And sorry, if you could identify yourself on the record.
Yes, absolutely. For the record, this is Carrie Wiedeker. I'm the Disaster Recovery Coordinator at the Office of Emergency Management. The Goose Lake was part of a larger project under maintenance and operations. Even though it's a parks facility, maintenance and operations had the responsibility. And there was a lot of back and forth about how to repair it, as a lot of the issues were not necessarily related to earthquake damage. And currently the plan is to just use the money to demolish it, because it is a safety concern, and there's not funding available to really fix it at the moment. So that's our best use of those funds, essentially.
Which requires a scope
That's,
change, because that's not what was originally. Remember, this earthquake happened in November, so there was a lot of snow and a lot of time. So when they came through with their staff and our employees and walked all the damage sites, they were doing visual cursory type things, and then the snow melts and then things are 10 times worse and that kind of stuff. So that caused a lot of challenges in that particular area.
Absolutely. Winter disasters. Ask a lot of the villages that get those fall sea storms. Those winter disasters just stretch out forever. And what we did essentially is FEMA has what they call an alternate project. So we took that one slice of work out of that project and created a whole nother project for it to use that funding towards something different, because we weren't going to be able to use that money to repair it.
You're welcome. Okay, any other questions? Okay, not seeing any. Thank you for being here. And I believe we've gotten through all of our business for today. So I'll just say again, we have big things that we talked about today that we will continue to work on. The other thing I'll say for members, just very briefly, my co-chair and I have been thinking about the conversation for next year's budget, which of course is early. We won't get to that for a little while. But we really want to think about being intentional as far as the Assembly's budget priorities, things that we've already put forward in our resolution last fall. And then we also know, of course, there's a lot of big conversations that are going to be coming up about revenue and a bunch of other topics. And so just as a very small preview, we are thinking about that. We're thinking about how to continue that conversation with the Assembly, and of course, looking into the rest of the year. So with that, we'll be adjourned and more later. Thank you.